Welcome to SmallTalk by Sforum Chatter. I'm Nachi Weinstein. On this episode of SmallTalk, I'm going to be joined by Rabbi Sroy Levitansky, who works for BMG, establishing kollelem around the world, and is also the author of the newly published book, Live Your Life by Design, Not by Default, 96 Takeaways from the Life of Mr. Avi Shulman, which is published by Israel Bookshop, which is not a conventional biography, as we're going to discuss here of Mr. Avi Shulman, who is Rabbi Levitansky's father-in-law. So thank you, Rabbi Levitansky, for joining me.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so what can you tell the listeners about this book?
Well, as you mentioned, it's not really a conventional biography. This book really are life lessons that I learned from my father-in-law. He was a fascinating individual, led a fascinating life. And when he passed away, I wanted to share some of those things that I learned from him with the broader audience.
So I also want to mention my personal connection here to Mr. Shulman, which is that the book came out and I saw it, and I'll get to that in a second, but I want to give a shout out and a thank you to Ellie Steinberg, our mutual friend here. Ellie mentioned to me, Nachi, do you want to do a podcast about this book with Reb Sroy? And I said, I don't know him. I think I heard your name. Your first name is unique anyways. And people were like,
Sure.
So I had heard of you. And I said, and I know of Mr. Avi Shulman, so he set this up. So thank you to Ellie. Now, about Mr. Shulman was my connection. So many years ago, I was in Mesivta Passaic. Not that many years. I was in Mesivta Passaic. And in 12th grade, they had English was only till Hanukkah, I think. And we had like one class. I remember one of the classes we had like once a week, we would have public speaking for Mr. Shulman. In Passaic, not far, he lived in Muncie. He would come in. He was older already in those years. He would come in to give us public speaking. And interestingly, personally, I was not a speaker, not a public speaker, certainly. In fact, I remember when I was in 11th grade, Rabbi Selnick, when I was his own yeshiva, he was my Bekiyas Rebbe, and he just came over. It was in the beginning of the year, and he's like, listen, you're going to speak by Oynik Shabbos, Friday night, you're going to speak. And I was like, me? I was like, freaked out. Okay, I prepared something. I got up there. I still remember where I was sitting. I was in his house. I started speaking, and I just froze up. You just freeze. And I couldn't remember what I was going to say. It was like so embarrassing. It felt like it was like an hour. It was like about a minute, not even. And eventually I remembered and pushed through, and that was the end. But when your father-in-law came, and he would prepare us, and the public speaking, we would have to get up and say a Dvar Torah in front of the whole shir, in front of the whole class. We'd have to say up a Dvar Torah every week. Still remember, I took a Ksav Sofer every week. I don't remember how many weeks it was. It was weeks on end. I don't remember how many weeks it was. And so I have a lot of Hakaras Tov. So when Ellie asked me, I said, listen, I would like to do that episode because I do have Hakaras Tov to Mr. Shulman, Zechron Livracha, because he, now I have this podcast and wherever else I'm speaking, I feel like I definitely owe him a lot of Hakaras Tov. So that's a little bit of brief, my personal connection, the little that I knew. I remember he would give out his pamphlet, the 6 constant mitzvahs, give out his book stars and whatever. Okay, so I'll let you, I think we should mention, though, something about him and his background, who he was, who we're talking about. Also, people probably listening going, Mr. Shulman? Why is he Mr.? He should be rabbi. Everybody's a rabbi today, right? Why is he Mr. Shulman? And just give the listener a little, even though this is not a biography, a little bit of his biography that the listener can understand who we're talking about.
Of course. In the beginning of the book, I do have a number of pages on a very, very short biography so that people who do not know who he was would have the opportunity to get a sense of who he was and what his life was about. He was born in the early 30s in Palestine, as a matter of fact, in pre-Eretz Yisrael days. Moved back to America as a young child and learned in Tervadas, learned in Telz, and then ended up in Lakewood by Reb Aaron. That's where he got married. He learned in Kollel here, and he was a first-grade Rebbe for a very long time, until slowly but surely he shifted into doing many other things for the Klal. He's probably most well known for leading the Seed program. He started Seed, he established it, and he brought it not only across the country, but across the world, in South America and in England. And today in England, Seed is not only a summertime learning program, it's a full-time kiruv organization in a number of cities that still runs very, very successfully. Public speaking, he wrote many books. He was the consummate educator, always looking to educate and inspire. And, you mentioned, Nachi, about public speaking, coming to the schools, the yeshivas to teach Bachram and Yungalai public speaking. It wasn't just that they should learn how to speak publicly. He believed passionately in the self-confidence that public speaking gave young Bachram and young Yungalite. And he also felt that someone who's learning in yeshiva, someone who spends his time growing in Torah, has powerful messages they're meant to share with others. And we have to teach them how to share those messages and how to become more proficient in sharing the ideas and concepts that they learned. That's one of the reasons that public speaking was so passionate to him, and he spent so much time teaching Bachram and Yungalite how to speak publicly.
he also, as you put in, he was also, as you write, warrior against foreign influences with ads against TV. And you have a picture of the New York Times ad that he took. Your babysitter has a brutal streak. And it's playing TV, and he wrote, it ain't I Love Lucy anymore. And he really went through, this is an interesting thing that he was involved with.
Yeah, he worked closely, I believe, with Rav Pam Zatzal at the time. There was a time not too long ago, a couple decades ago, that television was still in a Sayan. Today, it's kind of hard to believe that television's gone. TikTok, Instagram. It's a different world. And they used to have a big kinnis for 12th grade girls, speaking to them about this. And with Rav Pam, they felt that why are we only working on influencing the frum girls in 12th grade? What about reaching out more broadly? And if we have an ad in the New York Times, that means something to people. And back then, if you had a non-for-profit and the New York Times had space, you were able to get the page very, very cheaply. So the idea wasn't just that it can be in the New York Times, but they can use the fact that having the New York Times to share the concerns he had with the media, with the broad array of Yidden, both from and not from.
Okay, so as we said, this book is not a conventional biography. I think perhaps in the future there will be a conventional biography written by others,
right.
Not by you. But this book is more life lessons. But however, the book is full of stories, anecdotes. It's really peppered with a lot of information about Mr. Shulman's life. So, how can you define? How do you explain and what this book is?
So, can I give you a little bit of a background on how I wrote this book? Because I think that'll help you understand what this book's really all about. My father-in-law was a person that wasn't interested much in stories written about him. He struggled with that. And even when he was nifter, he asked that nothing should be written in any of the media about it. There was no article in the Yated. We actually thanked them for not writing. And people wanted to put, because he was a famous person, well-known person, he simply didn't want it. When it came time to the first yard side, I felt that we should have something written, at least for the family, about him. And I just sat down to write some of the things that I learned from him. I figured that's not a story. These are just life lessons that I learned from him. And I printed a small pamphlet with 25 life lessons, 200 copies, gave it out to the family. And the feedback was really positive. And slowly but surely, other people started reading it. And I got phone calls. Can I have it? Can I get it? Can you write more? I didn't consider myself an author. I can't say I'm not an author anymore, but I definitely didn't consider myself an author. I didn't sit down to write a book. I simply wanted to share the lessons I learned from him. He was such an amazing man in so many ways. And when I sat down to write, most of this came really just from me thinking, what did I learn from him? What did I see? Going back through my memories, not as stories, but each one has a powerful message and a powerful point.
So this book is all things that you, either your personal interactions, you observed, or stories that you heard from him, or did you go around asking family members for additional material?
I definitely asked family members for additional material, but the vast majority of this book is really from my recollections and my interactions, from what I heard from him, and from what I understood the way he lived his life.
One more thing to clarify is that, and I mentioned this before, I don't think we ended up discussing this, was why his name was Mr. Shulman, not Rabbi Shulman.
So, as you said, he was a rabbi. He was a rebbe for many years. He had smicha. I believe, and the family says this, I never asked him this directly, but Reb Shraga Feivel Mendelovich used to go by Mr. Mendelovich. And back when he was working on Seed and getting involved in the broader Klal Yisrael, he felt that as a clean-shaven person, not giving the rabbinic look, he'd be able to have an impact more broadly and reach people that maybe someone with a rabbi title couldn't. I believe that's the main reason that he did that.
Yeah, and all his books say Avi Shulman or Mr. Avi Shulman, and I remember he was very much a Mr. Remember when he came to Passaic, he was Mr. Shulman. That's how he was known. It's like he was Mr. He was definitely it was almost attached to his name. Where most people, you don't say Mr. If this guy's a Mr., you just say whatever his name is, right? Avi Shulman, don't say Mr. But he was Mr. Shulman. There
was a very hush of a person who read the book, and he was so excited. He said, "It's Meiridik, it's amazing. But how can you call such a man a Mr.?" He was very bothered, and I thought about it before I wrote the book, and I said that even though he really wasn't, he was really a rabbi, but that's the way he viewed himself, and that's the way he shared with others, and I felt that's the right thing to do when I write this book.
Yeah, he definitely was a Talmud Chacham and a fascinating individual, wrote many books, many svarim, and so on. So I'll explain. Obviously, there's 96 things, almost 96, not chapters, but mini, sub-chapters. I'll just say the, headers, so those can get a feeling of what it is, and you can pick out some things you want to highlight, some examples here, just a small taste of the book
for
the listener. So the first part is approach to life. where you have a live a life of design. And now, approach to life is the header. And I'll just mention, like, if there's 19 things in there, I'll mention a few. Live a life by design, not default, by yourself, self-definition, no negativity, never be late, honesty and integrity in all areas. If you say you'll become it, try new things, positive hang-ups. Okay. Then the second part, that was just a few. The second part is enjoy every moment, never get old. Some of the chapters there are enjoy life, enjoy people, enjoy life even in challenging times, and so on. Part 3, Menuchas HaNefesh, and some of the chapters in that section are Yishuv Hadas, don't rush, sleep on it, don't overthink, danger of perfection, live in the moment, I will ignore the pettiness of others, Shabbos starts with Erev Shabbos, and so on. Part 4 is interacting with others, and then part 6 you have goals, part 7 is public speaking, we have dress for success, the power of a speech, public speaking, amazing communicator, the consummate teacher, teaching others, inspiring others. Then the next part 7, I think we're up to a Torah life. Then in part 8 is challenges. Part 9 is transitions. And then part 10 is the greater goal. So I have a couple of different things. So if you want to just start and just pull out some that really stick out. Obviously, they all stick out to you. But what sticks out to you? Some examples you can give from the book and just in general about your shver for the listener.
Sure. So you mentioned the first 2 sections of the book. One is speaking about goal setting and many basic fundamentals for how to live and lead your life successfully. And the second one is enjoy every moment. And when I wrote the first short pamphlet about my father-in-law, the life lessons, it came across almost a little harsh. He was a structured person. He had goals. He really led himself. But it was missing the joy and simchas hachayim that he had. People really liked spending time with him. So I try in this book to go back and forth and help you appreciate how somebody can work on themselves and be a really worked on person, a really focused person, a really structured person. But that very same individual can be a person who loves to laugh, who loves people, who loves spending time with others, and loves enjoying every moment. And they're not a contradiction. So you can have goals that you set for yourself, and you can be very structured about those goals, but don't take yourself too seriously. Enjoy every moment of life is just as important as having good goals that will bring you where you want to get. When he passed away, I found in his office a little note, and the note said, no complaints, no blame, no self-pity. And I made a short chapter for each one of them, because whenever you knew him, whatever happened, he never blamed it on others. He didn't look at his life and say, oy vey, this is what's going on for me. Didn't allow himself the self-pity that some people may have. He always was trying new things. What does that look like? And that's what I try to share in the chapter of trying new things. One of the great messages and lessons that I personally learned from him is to wait till tomorrow. I'd call him with a question, something a little more serious, and he'd listen, and he'd say, there's no mitzvah to answer the question right now. Let's sleep on it. Call him in the morning. He'd say, the day just started. Call me back in a couple hours. The gift of time when we're making a decision allows us to be calm when we're making the decision. So many challenging decisions seem pressing. We have to answer in the moment. And he taught me, wait a day. In a day, you'll know what you're thinking. In a day, you'll have so much more clarity. In a day, you'll be able to answer this question so much more comfortably. A Torah life. He was a person who was focused and structured, goals within his own learning. He enjoyed learning, and at the age of 60, he went back to yeshiva after he spent decades traveling the country and the world for seed, didn't have that much time for focused learning. At 60 years old, he went back to high school, Beis Medrash, sat in shir for years to learn how to learn again with Bachrim, probably 40 years younger than him. He started at 60. He was in a shir with 17 and 18-year-olds, Reb Zal Berkowitz and Beis Shraga. It was an amazing lesson. How do we enter a new stage in life? A person's entering retirement. At that point, he has more time to learn. What does he do with it? I try to share those things. Each chapter is maybe 2 pages, sometimes less, meant to be a life lesson we can learn from one of the things that he lived.
Yeah, I mean, I remember myself when he came to yeshiva. He was an older man already at the time, and he would come there to speak to us every week, to us Bachrim, and I remember like his voice, distinct voice. I remember it was just to see that from him and how into it he was.
I have a very powerful memory. When I got married, my mother-in-law, which is his first wife, they found out she was ill a month before I started going out with my wife. And she was sick for the next 2 years, and she passed away 2 years after I got married. And one of the most powerful things that I learned from him was how he dealt with that challenge. Here was a couple who had a beautiful marriage, 9 children. They took care of each other. They cared for each other. Their marriage seemed almost, they just worked through everything perfectly. I don't know how to explain it. They were just like on the same wavelength. They enjoyed each other's company. You saw a really beautiful marriage, and his wife was dying, and he knew it. And how they both dealt with that, how they didn't allow that to overtake them and become defined by the illness. My mother-in-law used to say, I'm only sick for 15 minutes a day. That's when I take my medicine. The rest of the day, I'm the same person that I was. And I remember the last Shabbos of her life, I ended up with the siblings in Duke, North Carolina. And at that point, the family knew there was really nothing to do. The doctors had told them. And my father-in-law, I watched him over that Shabbos rise above the most amazing pain that one can imagine and insist that we spend the Shabbos the way Shabbos is meant to be spent. And those are moments that changed me forever. I was watching somebody who was in such control because he understood, such control, but he was so connected, that I wanted to share some of those things with a broader audience through this book.
What other examples would you like to give? Is there any others to highlight? Because there's so much in this book. Like I said, there's 96 things, and these are things that you really took out of, that your personal connection for many years and that you were inspired of. But are there any others just that you wanted to just mention?
I'll share you 2 more chapters in the book that share the way he looked at life in so many different ways. There's one chapter called Technology, Friend or Foe. And we're all used to hearing so many shmoozim and so many thoughts about the dangers of technology. And yet we also know the uses of it. And how do we approach it? And in my father-in-law's mind, technology was clearly a nisayon, maybe a nisayon like no other that we have today. But not only is there a danger in technology, but when we're forced and when we must engage with it for our work or for life or whatever we really need to do, and we use it effectively, then we have to recognize we've passed the nisayon as well. So it's important to recognize not only the test, but also the opportunity. Not only the dangers, but also the schar we're going to get when we actually use the technology effectively. And who knows how in Shemayim they're going to look and view at our technological use if we actually used it in the way that we're supposed to be, we fought the good fight and didn't fail, and were able to ultimately be successful in the use of technology. It was a spin on just the negative and recognizing the positive there. I guess I have to share with you one more. There's another chapter in there that talks about the power of a community kollel. And one of the great things about my father-in-law is his ability to share a story or a mashal, to bring home a point. And way back when communities were struggling with the concept of what does a community kollel accomplish, he had a short story he used to share that brought it home. And this is really not only a lesson about a community kollel, but it really shares the way he would approach things and the types of stories he would use to share a lesson. And he told of a business that manufactured shoes in the U.S. And the business struggled because competition was growing and their profit margin was getting weaker. And when the CEO met with the team, they decided the way to be successful is to offshore all of the production of the shoes. So they went to sub-Saharan Africa. They found a little village. They built the factory, and they were going to use all of the people that lived in that village as employees. And then again, the profits would shoot right up again. And everything worked. They started the company. Everybody came to work. And at the end of the first week, they paid everybody in the village $50 for their first week of work. And they shipped the first shipment of shoes back to the U.S. Monday morning, nobody shows up for work. The manager goes to the village elders and he asks them, what happened? Where is everybody? They went to check. They told him that it costs $50 a month to live in this village. Everybody got $50 for the first week. Nobody's coming back. So he calls the CEO of the company back in the U.S. and he says, we have no workers. They have $50. They have no more reason to come. CEO says to them, I'm sending you a huge crate overnight. Put one of whatever you find in this crate in front of every single house. The next morning, he gets a huge crate. He opens up, and inside, he finds the Sears catalog. For those of you of a certain generation, that means something. For those that didn't, imagine Amazon in a book. Back then, the Sears catalog had everything you can imagine, 500 pages of every toy, clothing, appliances, everything you can ever imagine. And he put one in front of every single door. And the next day, all of them came to work. What did the Sears catalog do? It raised the hasagas. It helped them appreciate on every level how much greater and more fulfilled their life could be if they had these things. My father-in-law would explain that's what a kollel does. When a kollel comes to a community and Bnei Torah come and learn with people, your entire connection to Hashem, your entire connection to Yiddishkeit grows in ways that you can never imagine.
I'm curious about your personal connection because this is what you do. You establish kollel, you're in charge of kollel. Did you get to this somehow through him?
He was definitely somebody I looked up to. And the fact that he ran Seed was something which intrigued me greatly. I went on Seed well before I was a part of the family. I also come from a home that was involved in kiruv and chinuch for many years. So I don't know if I took exactly his path, but there's no question that both my parents and my in-laws had a very powerful impact on what I do today.
Okay, so something about the book that you mentioned in the book, and that you mentioned to me as we discussed before, is that you don't read this book in one setting. It's not a book that you just take, sit down, and just run through the book. As we said, it's not a conventional biography, but it's also not something that you do, I guess, because of the lessons. But if you can clarify, what does that mean?
Sure. And you know what's really funny is I'm getting many people calling or emailing me about the book. And the vast majority of them begin with, I know you said to read only a chapter a day, but, so I know everyone's at least reading the introduction. The reason is, this is a thought-provoking book. And when you read too much thought-provoking information, your brain can't think anymore. And I found for myself, when I read thought-provoking books, if I read it more slowly, then I'm able to process a lot better. I know many people don't have patience for it, but I think that's definitely the best way to read the book and get the most out of it.
Who's the book meant for?
The book is meant for thinking people. The book is meant for growing people. The book is meant for people who look at their lives and say, I'd like to grow. I'd like to become better. I know I can accomplish more. So ultimately, the book is for everybody. Any person who's out there and says that my life is great and I know I can do better, this book's for you.
Finally, what are you trying to accomplish with this book?
I wrote this book to share the greatness of my father-in-law and what I learned from him. And to be able to perpetuate what he was and the lessons that he taught me is really the greatest gift that I can give myself. I felt driven, really, to share this. I felt driven to write this. I wrote it myself. It's not, sponsored. It's me because I really wanted to share this with a broad audience. I know how much I learned from him. I know how much so many thousands of people learned from him. What a great gift he gave so many. And if I can share that with the next generation and with others, Zechelki Mikol Amali. This is really all I'm trying to accomplish. Okay.
So thank you, Sroy, for joining me. I will link to the book in the show notes. It's available in farm stores, Israel Bookshop, Amazon, and so on. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. Greatly enjoyed.